So we're going to be posting to the general journal and general ledger to general journal to general ledger and improving the cash. That means we are going to be looking at posting the information in and seeing where we're at. So when we do a posting entry, we take from our general journal that we've been filling in for the last little bit. Let's look at this cash line. It's done on the January 2nd, so we go down to cash and put January 2nd. The amount was a 200 debit, or 2,000 debit, so I put it as debit 2,000. To start off with, you just transfer that number over. This is a running total. This behaves just like your T-charts, those first two columns. The page number gets written down here in the post reference as G1. And that account balance just transfers over. And then the account number for the cash gets put up in the post reference. This is a part a lot of people will forget to do, and it will take off points if you don't go back and put those account numbers. And so when we do the capitals and work the same way, we're going to go down to our credit balance, which was a capital, on January 2nd. We are going to go ahead and put the date. Then we're going to put the journal page, write the credit amount, and write the new account balance. So that's how you get an account started. But let's say we have a second one. So on the 5th, on our supplies account, we have a new transaction. We have a debit amount of 220 that's going to be coming over. So again, we're going to write the date to start with. We write the journal page, the debit amount. Now when we get over to the balance, we do a running balance. So we do 165 plus 220. And that gives us our new balance. So this shows us how our account is standing at any given point. That's the benefit of having these little separate pages. And then write the page, or the account number back over. And our payable for Canon office supplies, let's look at the same idea. But this time, on the 9th, we went ahead and wrote the 9th. Just like we've been doing, we wrote the date. We wrote our journal page 1, and we wrote the debit amount. Our running total has been in the credit column. We now have a debit. So we're going to subtract these two numbers when we come over to the balance. So if they're in opposite columns, you subtract and you put it in the column of whatever one's larger. It usually will go in your, well, for this book, it will always go in our running balance column. And then write your account number. And so when we get our journal page done, and then we're going to, posting is complete, we can see here that we have a cash balance, and we can see what our cash balance is. We can see the balance of any account that we want to look at. We have a 620 in supplies right now. Canon still owes us, we still owe Canon $120. And accounts Main Street still owes us $300. And so that gives us a quick way to see where our balances lay with any individual account versus when you were looking at the original page, you didn't get to see all that information. Determine the amounts of the cash agrees with the balance of the cash account is called proving cash. And so this is our check stub. Balance brought forward is what we had previously in the account. If this number matches here, then the cash is proven. So basically, is what in our bank match what we say we should have in our bank? We're golden. And so the 5 steps, you're going to write the date, write the journal page number, in the post reference column, write the amount in the debit or credit column, calculate the new balance by, if they're in opposite column, subtracting, same column adding, and then return to the journal and write the account number. Both debit and credit accounts have been posted to an account. What determines whether the balance is debit or credit? Whenever the debits exceed the credits, the amount is debit. When the credits exceed the debits, the balance is credit. So it's just whatever one has a larger total is what balance it's going to be. What two amounts are compared when you're proving cash? The cash balance shown in the checkbook and the cash balance shown on the cash account. And so let's go ahead and look at our lesson. So just like whenever we started doing this, there's a first little section, and you're going to do this part on your own, where you go through, and it's just going to teach you how it's graded, where everything goes, what they're looking for. So make sure you're reading the information here to help post, and reading the other information to show you some details to answer. But let's go ahead and do the work together. Again, I always start by unpinning this guy and moving him over and making him big to where I can see what I'm doing. Today is unfortunately not going to help me as much because a lot of what I'm using is here, and I'm not going to be able to unpin this and move it, unfortunately. But if you ever need me to, I can always print this page. You can just screenshot it and send it to me. And that's what you'll hear the girls asking me to print, to run off for them, as they'll sometimes need that printed. And I'll be glad to at any time. So on April 1st, our cash, so we go down to cash. We started off with April 1. We don't put anything in the item number. Our post reference, we're on page 1, so G1. And then we are going to put a debit amount of $2,500. And then that's going to slide over because there's nothing else in the account yet. And it's going to be our debit balance as well. I typically will go through and find all of one type of account when I'm posting. So I'm going to continue looking. The next cash transaction is on the 3rd of April. I don't have to write April that time. I just write 3rd, G1. And this time we have a credit total of $330. We need to subtract those amounts. And so $2,500 minus $330, we end up with $2,170. And so when we subtract it, we got $2,170. We're going to go on to the next one. And I'm going to pause it here for the video. And I'll come back to you when we get to page 2. Okay, so now we're going to go on to page 2. So we just go up here, click on page 2. And so on the 25th, we have pulling from G2 this time. And it was a cash credit. So a 500. So we're going to subtract 500 from our amount and get 1720. Now we're going to go down to the next account type, and you can collapse your cash by just pulling that arrow. Go to accounts receivable for Dan Carroll, and then we just go through and look for accounts receivable for Dan. And that's on the 16th is when it starts. Again, we need to type in April 16th. Our post reference is G1. And we're going to start it off, and it typically will always start off in the normal balance column for that type of account. Actually, wait a minute. There should be another one on the 9th. And the reason I knew there should be another one before that is I was not in the normal balance side for accounts receivable. And so 122 was how much that we let them take on account. And then on the 16th, he made a payment, and that's again on Journal 1. And he made a payment for $65. And so he still owes us $57. Collapse that out, and we'll go through and do supplies. April. And the supplies one we have comes from the 4th. Oops, I forgot the period. And General 1. And supplies, we put in supplies account 160. So we slide that over for the balance. Now we're going to prepaid insurance. And on the 3rd of April is when we posted that in there. This came from our Journal 1. And we put in 330 and just slide that over. And if you want to, you can keep going up here and posting in the account number so you can kind of see what you've done. And if that helps you, I sometimes wait till the end and go back and do all of them at the same time. But if you want to do that so you can kind of see what you've done so far, it may help you see what ones are still available to be used. And so we're going to go on to our accounts payable, which is our first 200s account. As a 200, this is going to be one where our normal balance is going to be in the credit column for the first time. And accounts payable to Reed Supply, we started with our account with them on the 4th. And this came from Journal 1. And we had a credit of 160 in that account. So it slides on over. And remember, as we're going through this, we are going to keep our normal balance on a 200 account is going to be in the credit column. And so that and then we paid off some of it. We paid off $80 on the 15th. And bring our total down to 80. Oh, 210. And then go on to our capital account. And for our capitals, when we started the company up on April 1st, and our post reference is G1, and we start off, and any capital on our capital account is going to be a credit balance, or normal balance, and we'll fill in that normal balance over here. Our drawing normal balance is going to be in the debit side. And so I believe that's on page 2 when we took withdrawing. Yeah. On page 2, on April 25th, we have, coming from page 2 of our journal, a normal balance of 500, which is in our debit column, and it just slides over. Sales we actually had 2 sales to record. We had sales on both the 8th and the 9th. So April 8th. And this comes from our page 1 of our journal. We had a sales, and the normal balance for our sales is going to be in the credit column of $325. And then on the 9th, we had also, oh, and I've heard to slide it over, $325. On the 9th, we had $122. And we add $325 to $122, and we get $447. And then our last one to do is going to be our expense one, which is on the 12th, when we wrote for our rent and general 1. And expenses, normal balance, is going to be on the debit column. So any of your 500s, make sure you put it in the debit column for your normal side. And we're going to slide it over for the balance. And 510. Sales was 410. Just double check to make sure you didn't leave any of the numbers off. Because I have a bad habit of doing that. Oops. 320 and 110. This process is slow, but it's given us to where we have where our account is standing. So we know right now we have $1,720 in our bank account, is what that cash tells us. We know that Dan still owes us $57 by pulling back up his account. And you might just double check and make sure you have all your journals written in, and then save and continue. And then do yours on your own by yourself. And then don't forget the application.